Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wellington branch of the Theosophical Society. It's lovely to have you here. What we normally do is we start with a moment's silence, then we'll do an invocation to unity, then I'll introduce the society, and then we'll introduce our presenter this evening. So let's just have a moment of silence, please. Please repeat after me. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom. O hidden light, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May each who feels himself as one with thee. Know they're also one with every other. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Thank you. So the Theosophical Society was founded for one specific purpose, which was to create the nucleus of a new society, a society of divine wisdom, where the emphasis is on unity and consciousness. So we don't make distinctions of culture, gender, or ethnicity, but rather we focus on the fact that all life is one, the spirit is one, and that human beings can manifest this awareness on earth. So to help us bring that about, we encourage a study of comparative religion, philosophy, and science, and the investigation into the unexplained laws of nature and the powers that relate in each one of us. So the Society has no dogmas or creeds or authority figures, and what you hear from the platform you are free to accept or reject. So the Society is not a religion in and of itself, but it studies all the teachings of the spiritual traditions and religions known as Theosophy, literally the divine wisdom. Our president, founder, Colonel Lockhart, said we're all students inquiring into the nature of reality. So we're here to support each other in our own spiritual quest and path. Theosophical Society is a worldwide organisation in over 60 countries, and it's marking from November 17th its 149th year existence. So this evening, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Jim Scrivener, whom I've known for 34 years, a great friend. Jim is a retired architect and has an interest in music and theosophy. He enjoys playing the French horn at the Taranaki Symphony Orchestra, and has been involved in the Theosophical Society since 1988, serving in the New Plymouth branch in various roles. So currently, Jim, you're the president of the New Plymouth branch, and it's great to have you here. Jim is a national speaker, so he's touring, doing some lectures around other Theosophical branches. So it's lovely to have you here, Jim. So Jim's talk tonight is Service and Theosophical Life. So Jim, over to you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Simon. And yeah, thank you for inviting me, first of all. It's great to be here again. Appreciate it. So I'm going to be probably telling a lot of people that are involved in service how to suck eggs, but I thought what I would do, though, is just leave you with a few thoughts and a few ideas from some well-respected theosophical people about what service is. So everyone's seen the Lord of the Rings films. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. Gandalf, Lord of the Rings. So service could be regarded as 1/3 of a theosophical or a spiritual life. The other two aspects being study and meditation. And I can't remember where I got this little quote from, but study that we may learn, meditation that we may understand, and service that we may come to self-knowledge, and all three are necessary. So it's just some simple definitions of service. Use or assistance, benefit conferred or exertion made on behalf of someone, a duty or a stint, quite a lot of you have done duties or stints keeping the doors of the Theosophical Society open. Well done. Aid or assistance, help, administration. So it's also used as in church services, of course. Usefulness, value, to maintain, repair, sustain, preserve. And I'm sure this building requires a lot of service from that point of view as well. But also, again, the idea of ceremony, rite, sermon, or worship. So just a few of the different meanings we use for the word. So from the feet of the master, at the feet of the master, the wisdom which enables you to help, the will which directs the wisdom, the love which inspires the will. These are your qualifications: will, wisdom, and love. So we're all inspired to go out and do wonderful things selflessly. Well, we'd better take note of another little passage in the same book from the section Self-Control and Action. If your thought is what it should be, you will have little trouble with your action. Yet remember that to be useful to mankind, thought must result in action. There must be no laziness, but constant activity and good work. But it must be your own duty that you do, not another man's, unless with his permission and by way of helping him. Leave every man to do his own work in his own way. Be always ready to help where it is needed, but never interfere. So, yeah, it takes a bit of discernment, I guess. And further, because you try to take up the higher work, you must not forget your ordinary duties, for until they are done, you're not free for other service. You should undertake no new worldly duties, but those that you've already taken upon you. You must fill those that you have already taken upon you, you must fulfill perfectly. All clear and reasonable duties which you yourself recognize. That is, not imaginary duties which others tried to impose on you. If you are to be his, you must do ordinary work better than others, not worse, because you must do that also for his sake. So he's adding a little word of caution there. And towards the end, he says, you must be so filled with the intense desire of service that you are ever on the watch to render it all around you, not to man alone, but even to animals and plants. You must render it in small things every day, that the habit may be formed, so that you may not miss the rare opportunity when the great thing offers itself to be done. And he who is on the path exists not for himself, but for others. He has forgotten himself in order that he may serve them. And this is where that little quote came from before. The wisdom which enables you to help, the will which directs the wisdom, and the love which inspires the will. These are your qualifications: will, wisdom, and love. So we still need that desire, however cautious. So again, from at the feet of the master, you must distinguish not only the useful from the useless, but the more useful from the less useful. To feed the poor is good and noble and useful work, yet to feed their souls is nobler and more useful than to feed their bodies. Any rich man can feed the body, but only those who know can feed the soul. So if you know, it is your duty to help others to know. And later on, all knowledge is useful, and one day you will have all knowledge. But while you only have part, take care that it is the most useful part. Study then, but study first that which will most help you to help others. So it gives us some quite useful tips there, really. And this is from HPB and John Algeo. In his article, Living Theosophy in The Theosophist of March 1998, John Algeo quotes HPB in a letter to the 1888 convention in the United States. Theosophists are of necessity the friends of all movements in the world, whether intellectual or simply practical, for the amelioration of the condition of mankind, and goes on to list many charitable and reform types of organizations. But she says, as Theosophists, we can't engage in any one of these great works in particular. As individuals we can, but as Theosophists, we have a larger, more important, and more difficult work to do, being dissemination of the Theosophical view. If the cause of humanity's ills is not addressed, then all the charitable and aid work will at best be temporary and ultimately ineffective. Yeah, I think we can probably agree with that. There's just as a comment, there's an awful lot. You hear it daily in the papers, money for this, money for that. There's not enough health service, mental health problems, not enough being funded here. And it seems to me, just perhaps I'm an ignorant bystander, but it's ambulance at the bottom of the cliff stuff. Whereas this is talking about some of the causes, changing the causes of what's causing the problems. If we can tackle it at that level.
This is the thing, Jim, in terms of the work of society. We were saying, obviously, we're more than just flesh and blood. And there's a framework around that. So if you apply those teachings, you actually can keep yourself mentally going over the cliff in the first place. How you live, it's kind of consequences for what you do. So can you change and transform yourself? Which we have information, all the sages from all the traditions talk about changing yourself. So yeah, and this is what in terms of the Theosophical worldview, because there's no dogmas or creeds, the members come through their own organic growth without any coercion to the same point of view in some way, which is what you call the Theosophical worldview. So everyone can understand and change their life in a similar way, and be peaceful, more peaceful than ever.
Yeah, it's very well put. And I suppose the other thing is, to be in a position to help other people, you have to develop yourself. And I guess that's part of the Theosophical Society as well.
Jim, can I just make a comment here? You mentioned discernment before, and it's a very, very crucial part of our journey is to develop discernment. And I'd like to suggest that we need to be able to discern when, how, and to what extent we do offer practical help to people, bearing in mind that the soul that is in a deep mire of need is going to find it very difficult to look towards their spiritual development. So that's where I see such as the work of the TOS being very, very important to help people take that little step so that they can be relieved of their suffering sufficiently to then be able to look at the higher development.
Yes, that's very well put, Chris. Yes, you do have to lift people to a point where they can start thinking about the bigger picture. Yeah, very well put. And another thing from John Algeo, the only cure for the disease and the only alleviation of the symptoms is to awake from the nightmare of separateness to the daylight of unity and altruism. effecting that cure is the purpose of Theosophical service. And Rhoda Bernier, and this comes from her On the Watchtower of April 1998, called Deeds, Not Words. And in her article, she talks about a tendency of the human mind to be content with theoretical understanding of religious and spiritual truths, and not to proceed further by acting according to that understanding. This is because it is easy to make an intellectual study of the spiritual life, while the effort to live that life calls for strong determination, perseverance, courage, sacrifice, and other qualities. And she refers, among other things, to the Noble Eightfold Path from the Lord Buddha. One of the requirements is right exertion, and often we spend a tremendous amount of energy in ephemeral pursuits to achieve success which will last for the short span of a lifetime or less, or to obtain possessions which benefit no one. The really hard exertion is that which brings about changes in our own thinking, reactions, and attitudes. And we don't need to give up our normal job or responsibilities. It's while we're doing them, we need to observe what's happening within the mind. Outwardly, life doesn't necessarily change. We don't need to give up family and friends, give up one's profession unless it is harmful, or become a recluse. These may happen naturally and eventually, but the average person need not fear his life will be upturned. And the practice of discernment in the midst of daily life is one of the most important deeds to be undertaken by an esoteric student. Familiarity with books, beautiful words, does not prepare one in any way. We're doomed. Newness or change will only come about by our discernment through sifting our thoughts and motives and freeing the mind of its old and useless psychological content. So some interesting words there. And Professor P. Krishna, he wrote an article, Right Education in the 21st Century, and that was printed in Theosophy in New Zealand, June 2001. And he lists some of the major challenges he sees in today's world, and these still seem relevant today, 23 years later. And Professor P. Krishna was a previous professor of physics, and he interacted with Krishnamurti over a period of 25 years as a student of his teachings. So he talks here about groupism or division, causing insecurity, violence, terrorism, wars. Nothing's changed there. The power unleashed by science and technology, and we know about the power of today's weapons, and that seems to be getting worse rather than better. The environmental catastrophes, ozone depletion, nuclear fallouts, overpopulation, treating nature as a thing to be exploited. And I suppose we would add here climate change and how we're not helping it. Dictatorships, most of the third world are still under these. The breakdown of the family. No one has found a better way of raising children than through a family unit. And the inertia of society. And that's probably the biggest one, I think. Prejudices and illusions tend to continue from one generation to the next, and so do the problems associated with them. And we need to create inquiring minds. So I think they're quite wise words from him. And he says on the present vision of education, just go back a little bit. Modern education is aiming to produce a human being who is intelligent, knowledgeable, hardworking, efficient, disciplined, smart, successful, and hopefully a leader in the field of his endeavour. The major challenges facing mankind today are not due to a lack of education. The major challenges facing mankind today, they are not created by the illiterate villagers in Asia or Africa. They are created by the highly educated and professional minds of lawyers, business administrators, scientists, economists, military commanders, diplomats, and the like, who plan and run governments, organisations, and businesses. It is a lopsided development, and as educationalists, we must accept that when we impart knowledge, it is our responsibility to impart or awaken the wisdom to employ it rightly. So again, pretty deep thoughts there. And he says the broad outlines of a different vision of education, as he sees it, are to create a global mind, not a nationalistic one, to emphasize human development, not only economic, encourage inquiry, not conformity, create a learning mind instead of an acquisitive mind, create a mind that is both scientific and religious in the true sense, the art of living, and a holistic development of all faculties. And what we need is not more ability and more efficiency, but greater cohesion, greater compassion, greater capacity to share and work together. So the Dalai Lama has a few words. Often the Dalai Lama refers to practicing compassion, the ability to empathize with another person or being, particularly if they need help or are in suffering. The warm-heartedness which he spoke of in his visit to New Zealand. He goes further, I truly believe that compassion provides the basis of human survival, the real value of human life, and without that, there is a basic piece missing. And that little piece comes from his book, The Art of Happiness. So what I'm suggesting here is that service is closely related to compassion and arises out of it. Generally, one needs some kind of compassion or empathy to generate the feeling and will to help. And the Dalai Lama describes some methods for practicing and strengthening compassion, but the basic method is to use your imagination, creativity, to visualize yourself in another's situation. It's not really rocket science. And here are a few notes from his talk when he came to Auckland in 2002, and thanks go to Helen Pollock for transcribing them from the video that she and Brian took. And these are a few little extracts from what he said. What is important is whether we use time properly or not. So think back to Gandalf there. Day to day, it is good to help others, sharing. This is a real meaningful life. The nature of existence is to smile and have a warm heart and act in friendship. This is, if we human beings do not transform inwardly, we shall soon join the list of those unfortunate creatures that lived 1 million years ago and then became extinct when they could not adapt themselves. And I've got one more. What we need is not more ability and more efficiency, but again, greater cohesion, greater compassion, greater capacity and to share and work together. And of course, as you mentioned, Chris, before, the Theosophical Order of Service, whose motto, a union of those who love in the service of all that suffers. And I'm sure most of you would be aware of this. Yeah. So not all of them. So it's an international organisation founded in 1908 to provide a framework in which people can engage in creative, practical and humanitarian action in a theosophical spirit, and it offers opportunities for participation in activities promoting the first object of the society to form a nucleus of the universal kinship of humanity without distinction of ethnicity, creed, gender, caste or colour. So do you have a branch here operating?
Well, Swishman's done some, over the last 15 years since she's been here, we have had Theosophical sort of TOS activity, right?
Yes.
We didn't lately, but we did quite a lot over the years.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, it has operated sporadically, I think, throughout the country, even in New Plymouth for a while when the Pollocks were there, they were doing a lot, but it's another outlet for those who want to do something practical. It's not the first aim, it's not the Theosophical Society, it's an arm off it, I suppose you could say.
It's a separate organisation.
That's right.
But it's a sister organisation.
Yeah.
There's a lot of members of the society involved in it. Because they wanted it to come about and this founded in 1908. The second Lord President.
Now, although this talk was all about service, the other two things that go with it, of course, are study and meditation. So I just included a few little bits from the Feet of the Master about study, just to remind you. Have you all seen that little book at the Feet of the Master? Most of you would have seen it when you joined. So again, and they tie up again discrimination and discernment with how we act in our capacity to serve. So I won't read them all out, but and from Radha, from the Way of Self-Knowledge, her book, wisdom in all its aspects is different from knowledge. Knowledge in the ordinary sense of the term is knowledge of facts. It is an accumulation of information. It does not demand that there must be action according to the facts or information known. Wisdom is of an entirely different character, for it cannot exist without translating itself into the quality of relationships and action. Therefore, wisdom is always practical. Wherever there is a divergence between thought and action, theory and practice, there is an absence of wisdom. So I think this kind of ties again in with service. You're using wisdom in service. You're not just accumulating knowledge. You might need some knowledge to start with, but when you're putting it into action.
I said something, Jim, it's like the people that can talk something, but they don't walk it. It's very easy to do.
Yeah. And just a few little notes from Clara Codd on meditation. So the goal is to become that which we are. It's a practice to realize one's inner possibilities. It's initially a mental process directed towards a spiritual end, and ultimately the whole awakened powers are enlisted and oriented towards the supreme goal. It does require some systematic and sustained thinking, and also requires that our hearts be in it. And she wrote quite a great little book on that, and if you haven't read it already, it's worth reading.
It's a side. Bernice Croft, who passed for a year or so, her auntie was in correspondence with Clara Codd, like early philosophy in the start of the 20th century, and Bernice donated the letters to us on the Welsh.
Wow.
Clara Codd, correspondence between her auntie and Clara Codd.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
But the connection from some of the old ones.
Mm.
Forward society.
Gosh. I did have a few more notes on this, but I'm not going to go right through them because they're on, on the notes page, which I can't remember. Anyway. And I thought I'd sort of come towards the end with a, again, related to meditation, this part of a poem by Robert Browning, which I'm sure you've all come across in your reading. Truth is within ourselves. It takes no rise from outward things, whate'er you may believe. There is an inmost centre in ourselves, where truth abides in fullness, and to know rather consists in finding out a way whence the imprisoned glory may escape, than by effecting entrance for a light supposed to be without. So quite an interesting take on meditation, really. So I'm going to come to an end here. What might service mean for those aiming to live a theosophical life? So we heard some of the speakers there: Krishnamurti, John Algeo, Radhaji, Professor Krishna, and the Dalai Lama, among others. Just trying to find my final notes, and just bear with me, talk amongst yourselves. So what does it actually mean for those aiming to live a theosophical life? Well, it's going to be different for each of us, but here are a few tips I picked up about service that we sort of touched on tonight. Be ready to help, but not interfering. Service can't be done in place of our ordinary duties. Distinguishing the more useful from the less useful is necessary. Disseminating the theosophical worldview is a really useful service. Right exertion, which brings about a change in our own thinking, reactions, and attitudes, is important. Helping to create a global mind and building a greater capacity to share and work together is vital. And empathy, compassion, and warm-heartedness are vital. Again, those words from the Dalai Lama. So at that point, I'd like to wrap it up, but open it up for any comments and discussion that you might.
Okay, so Paul, can you share your screen?
Mm-hmm. Let's see, I've got to find it first. Stop share.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, what I'll do. Quickly go on up. So I'll come around here, Jim. So we're all on camera together. Okay, so some questions, comments, thoughts.
I might have dribbled on longer, but I thought, no, let's keep it.
I love that expression. No, you didn't dribble. It's been so interesting listening to you, reminding some of us you're being reminded of things that we might have forgotten in the hubbub of life. And I'd just like to say that sometimes over the years, we've probably all encountered new members who have said, so what do you actually do? And I do think it's very useful to mention the Theosophical Order of Service and to make it clear to people that apart from some places in the third world countries where they need to be more obvious in order to operate, all of us can practice being of service without a banner, just quietly within our own little circle, within our family and within our communities. And so we don't need to actually identify with a group to do that. And that's really what you've made clear today. It's a journey that's all about us making the effort as individuals, isn't it?
Hmm.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you, Chris. That's a great contribution. Yeah.
I think a lot of people, well, some people in the society there will also members of a church find their service within the church.
Yes.
Because there's not a lot of activity within the Theosophical society. It's other ways to find.
Okay. Yeah, and all power to them. Yeah, I mean, it's what it's all about, and it's sort of recognizing the need and doing it because it needs doing rather than any other particular reason. Yeah.
Did everyone hear Brett's comment online?
Not fully.
He was talking about people in the church that do their service in the church.
As well as being members of the society.
Some of the
Well,
members.
I have. I've become aware since I've lived in Napier and been involved in volunteer work, that when push comes to shove, for people in really great need, there isn't a system there. But I have to say it's the Christian churches here who are available. And yeah, they should be acknowledged for that.
Ganesh has mentioned a book by I.K. Timey, Principles of Theosophical Work. And he says it's a good book and you could share a copy if anyone's interested. Thanks, Ganesh. Do you want to mention anything about it, Ganeshi?
Oh, it's muted.
Not exactly. I think actually he has covered quite a few points. Just only one thing, when we talk about service, it may be a good idea. You get a great joy especially when you do a bit of a service for people whom you do not even know. Say, for example, you just go to a place actually where they are serving food for the people or anything. You do not know, you go there and you do not know anybody, but you are involved in the service and helping them even physically. And at the end of the time, service, you definitely feel happy.
That's true.
Yes, it's like one of the things mentioned before. If you get into the habit of service, then you're doing it in every little opportunity. Then there may be some great opportunity that arises later. But if you get into the habit of it, it's fantastic. And if it's in helping people, at soup kitchens or food banks or whatever it is, I'd say go for it.
I mean, there's one point of for members, in the Theosophical Society, and that's essentially changing consciousness, changing ourselves, and thereby changing consciousness of the world. And this lodge, for example, is 106 years old, and it's had all this theosophical activity going through it for over a century. So we're actually creating a nice little energy that goes out into the community and helps uplift it. So regular attendance at lodge meetings, getting involved in the work, we're essentially changing ourselves through regular attendance and participation, and therefore changing the environment that we're in mentally and emotionally and spiritually. So it's not so as the service in the Theosophical Society is not so overt as it is, for example, in the Theosophical Order of Service, but it's still a valuable service nevertheless. And for example, with the Masonic tradition as well, again, it's a ritualistic, but it's a service in terms of with subtler energies. So you're doing another form of service again. So every piece of work that a particular organisation is doing is quite relevant in terms of the service it's providing.
Even this object of treating people equally, no matter what their status and religion, what they look like. But yeah, that's just so important in the modern world. There's so many problems with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's so, in one way, it's simple. If we can change ourselves, it changes the way we react with other people. And that has its subtle flow-on effects. If our attitudes are sort of a unified nature, rather than separateness, you know, it makes such a difference.
Okay, I've got a question here from Gloria. Oh, hang on. She says, I like how the Sikhs feed people in their community and don't have to, you know, to be a Sikh to go there for community or food. Yeah, when I was in India as well, like the Ramana Maharshi Ashram, they were feeding, you know, providing food. All of the temples that Sush went around a couple of weeks ago that she was showing on her trip, you know, a lot of it, they were providing food service. So yeah, absolutely, Gloria. Do you have another, your hand up there, Ganesh? You want to say something else?
Yes, I just want to say something. You know, most of us are familiar with the meditation. One of the biggest problems when we are doing the meditation is we are not able to focus ourselves. All the time, I think even when we sit down for meditation, what we are doing is, I think quietening my physical body. I think my astral body, I want to control my thoughts. I want to quieten my thoughts. What happens is most of the time when we sit for meditation, one thing that comes to us is the question of this I. Okay. So to get rid of that I think service is one of the most effective way to forget ourselves. When you are involved in service to others, you completely forget yourself, which helps you in meditation. Thank you.
That's very true. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
And it's very true, you know, they say if people feel a bit low in mood themselves, do something for someone else. It's actually, if you're being of service to someone else, in whatever little way it might happen to be, you might just be helping an old lady cross the road, let's say. But whatever you're doing, whilst you're doing that, it is not possible to also dwell on yourself. You just are so totally absorbed in an action when it's service to someone else. It's very interesting.
Yes,
Yeah,
you live,
I think
for others.
Even in the Indian tradition, they talk about actually what you call as Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, that is the study, meditation, and also to realize the oneself. Nowhere in any of the literature they talk about service. It is only the Theosophical Society one talks about study, meditation, and service. So the service is a kind of a hidden parable how to achieve meditation. I mean, my thinking.
Yeah, no, that makes sense very much, Ganesh. Thank you.
It's interesting in terms of sometimes you haven't got much energy, or if you're on a committee, you got to get along and do the work. But at the end of the night, after coming to the lodge, you feel a bit uplifted. You know,
You do.
I've experienced that many times. You got to do your work. You've had a tough day at the office or whatever it might be. But at the end of the night, if you come, you actually feel uplifted because you're amongst, you know, like-minded souls, and you're inquiring, and you're actually not thinking of yourself for a part of the day. So yeah,
I also think that when you come here and you go through your invocation to start off, it does something to vibrations. And we're all gathered here at this time regularly, and those in the ethers know this, and they do turn up and they do something, and you may not be too physically aware of it. But I've learned this because I was redoing it, had to question it at times, but I have learned that if you just sit here, it doesn't matter what you're overtly doing out there, because It's what they're doing out there, and even ourselves, what we're doing as well. And there's all kinds of things going on, I think, in some ways at the same time. And you go away, and I've noticed that the next day and the next, you know, my mind has changed, you know, my feeling state, I think, has changed. And I feel it has an effect, and you'll feel it wind down. And then at the end of Saturday and Sunday towards the next TS day, I feel things change again. So it's like they're getting ready for the next one. It's quite funny. But I sort of like, you know, they're coming. But yeah. So there's lots of things. That's just my experience. Yeah.
Well, that's the whole thing. I agree, Louise. That's the whole point of it all, because regular attendance creates an energy, and you're working all together for the same purpose. So those subtle energies can come down and influence us and connect with us. And one of our goals, like we do our healing service, is to consciously work with those subtler energies to send healing, you know, superphysically to others. So being open and being aligned as a group, as opposed to just sitting at home on your own, has far more power and potential to do good, as it were. Yeah,
I do think that unseen, the more the merrier. I mean, the bigger the better, if you like, collectively. And also, it is far better to gather here in a well-meaning manner, whatever it is that you may not know everything about. Yeah, because that stuff, if something happens, and we'd be unwise, if you like, to say that it isn't when we're not sure that it isn't, because it is. Well,
we've had many Theosophists from all around the world who've come into this hall, and they say there's something here. It's a nice energy here.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got 100 years of it happening.
Well, there should be well established by now, shouldn't it?
Well,
I mean, whatever.
Helen, do you want to mention anything in terms of the Davic energies here? You or Brian want to mention anything?
Oh, there's someone.
You have to put you're on mute.
That's not my area, Simon. Sorry, and Brian's not available at the moment. So,
okay,
but I'm sure there is something there. Yes.
Okay.
I am reminding myself. Thank you very much, Jim. Good to hear you. Good to hear these thoughts again. We need to be reminded of them constantly. I always say to myself that it's not so much about what I do, it's the intention that I have as I do it.
Barry.
Yeah, kia ora, folks. Thanks, Jim, for presentation as well. Yeah, got a lot out of that one tonight. And yeah, trying to get a vibe online, missing a lot from what you've said there. Louise as well. Yeah, there's a lot there. Might come into what Jane has said in the chat comments, actually. It looked like you'd given this presentation way back in 2003, or a version of it.
Yes, it was, yeah.
Yeah. So just kind of wondering how it might have been evolved over time, or if the things you may have added, or if there's even anything you've taken away, or just how it's evolved over time. If there's anything you...
Oh, I can't remember, but I have changed it quite a bit, yeah. Even today I was fiddling with it, yeah. Yes, and thanks, Helen, for those comments from the Dalai Lama's visit. That came from the 2002 talk.
I'm glad you remember, Jim, because I don't. I remember going, but I don't remember writing the comment. So well done.
Just a quick one. Normally they talk about delivering a lecture. Until the time that it is delivered, even the person who is delivering it do not know how it is going to be presented. Each time, even if it is the same talk, because I had been a teacher and lecturer, it is the same thing I repeat year after year. But each time, what I give is completely different from what I have presented earlier. That always happens.
Thank you. Yeah.
Right. Oh, that's Maureen. Maureen. Thanks, Jim. Always worth listening to your presentations. I still have the first one I heard you science seminar many years ago. Lara May filmed those sessions, which I purchased. Thanks, Lara May. It was to do with disciples, I recall. The science seminar was the first time I truly realized the society was more than I previously realized. Nice to see you, Jim. Do you remember filming that, Lara May?
Yes.
Yes. Very good.
Simon,
Jess, yeah.
I thank you, Jim, for your talk, and I think lots of that resonated with me, and one of the comments where people talked about kind of aspects to enhance your physical well-being as well, also enhances spiritual well-being. And I've been doing a lot of work on Te Whare Tapapa at the moment, which is a Māori holistic way of looking at well-being. And it talks about well-being as kind of 4 walls, kind of similar to the room that we're in now, where it's kind of physical, which is taha tinana, taha hinengaro, which is the spiritual and emotional side of things. There's taha wairua, which is the spiritual as well. And the last one's escaped me, but I think it talks about how all of these things need to be in balance to achieve true well-being. So that really resonated.
Oh, yeah. It's fantastic. Yeah.
And thanks, Jess. And I'm going to put you on I'm just going to put a plug in for Jess for next year. She's going to do some stuff on Theosophy and Maori spirituality.
Oh, wow. Gosh.
But we've got everything programmed lined up for this year, but great.
Yeah, no, there's so much to be learned from all cultures. Yeah.
Well, I mean, at the international headquarters, you've got all the spiritual traditions. Each got a shrine there, you know, and there's activities that go on there during the convention. And Sishma talked a little bit about that a couple of weeks ago on some of the temples. So, you know, I mean, Theosophical Society held the first Parliament of the World Religions in the early 1900s, late 1880s. And because we're new back then, everyone came except the Christians, who were a little bit, you know, concerned about what was going on with the freedom of thought. But since then, you know, this is the whole raison d'etre of society, to look at all the traditions, because all the tahangas, all the spiritual sages, all the traditions, they're all saying the same thing, whether from the east, west, north, south. So, I mean, we're an eclectic bunch, you know. A lot of people have affinities here, and here, but the whole theosophical worldview, what Jim was talking about tonight, that's what we're all trying to get to organically without any coercion. And the fact that the membership continues on, this building exists because of the members who put their funds into it, and all around the world, you know, it shows that the values of what we're trying to do are universal and have meaning for all human beings, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's the great thing about, you know, studying comparative religion and all the different spiritualities. We're looking for the commonalities rather than the differences, because there will be differences, but there's an awful lot that's common, and that's the key to it, isn't it, really?
And to treat each other properly, because really that's what war is. You know, we really do. It's all about being good and treat, and you know,
or realizing we're all one
or,
at a certain level.
Like, even from time to time, we get stuff coming through the letterbox, the door at the front of the lodge. You know, sometimes we're heathens and heretics and whatever.
Really?
Oh yeah, I get lots of stuff. Last week, 2 weeks ago, someone wrote on the pavement right at the front in chalk. Beautiful. God is love. Oh yes, amazing. You know, because that's from the Christian tradition, actually. Staying in might be the Gospel of John. Like God, my teacher Rabbi Ravindra said, God isn't loving, God is love. And that was out in the chalk in the front of the step. It was great.
and also we are, because we are all. I mean, I always get lost a little bit with God because I don't quite know where he is, but we are all what you can say, maybe this likeness, you know, we are all God. So we love, and it's about us and for us, and it is not always, yeah, well, I mean, the nebulous is a little more difficult. But that whoever's here and whatever is true is us. You know, that's what I think. Well, that's what I've noticed.
Yeah, very good.
Okay, fantastic. That's a nice spot to finish with, Louise. All right. Okay, so I'll officially thank you, Jim. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming and having dinner with us as well. For those who could attend, it was great. So I will close.